All right. I just wanted to say hi, everyone. I'm Jill Grober. I'm one of the members of the RISD Alumni Club in New York City. And I just wanted to thank everybody for coming and supporting the club. And I encourage everyone to reach out to us and let us know ways that RISD New York alumni can serve you guys. And I just wanted to introduce Tom Weis and Anthony and Julie and thank them all for their thoughtfulness into this webinar and giving their time today. And Tom, I'll pass it on to you. Thank you guys.
Great, thanks Jill. So welcome everyone. Super excited that you could all join us tonight. We know that many of you probably spend too much time on your computers. So thank you for spending a little more time, but we think this is going to be a really fun conversation. And I'm super excited because I get to reconnect with some friends that I haven't seen for a little while. But first of all, I'm Tom Weis. I'm an associate professor in the industrial design department at RISD. And I want to hand it over and introduce Anthony and Julie. And then we'll have the kind of conversation where we'll talk about lots of different things. And there'll be a little Q&A at the end, so you can chat some questions in and we'll get to them later. But we hope this is the kind of conversation where, you know, if we were at a bar, you would just sit down and join us for a drink because it's just some friends talking about, you know, things that we're interested in and what these two have been up to. So Julie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, great. And typically Anthony and I would be together in a room, but I am in Los Angeles right now, very far away from home. But I was a RISD graduate, 08 textile design. And now I have a clothing design company called Rudy Chewed that I run from Maine. We have a store in California, a factory in California. And so that is why I'm here right now. But I'm really excited to talk about our home life and our work life, and so happy that we were asked.
Yeah, I'm Anthony. I'm back here in Maine, and I graduated in 2009 in sculpture, and I've been in Maine, it's almost 10 years now, and we've been just getting after it, doing all kinds of stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into in the conversation. But the most recent, I built our family compound here in Sprucehead, and it's led to all kinds of interesting things that I never thought I would be doing. And now I get to just really kind of advance and push forward my sculptural practice in these new ways. So there we go.
Great. So let's jump into some questions. And since we have so many, I'm guessing so many alums or students in our audience tonight, a lot of them are familiar with RISD culture and the different departments at RISD. So Julie, you were textiles, and Anthony, you were sculpture. My master's was in ID, and as all of you know, sometimes we tend to stay in our departments when we're at RISD. And so I can't speak for the undergrad program, but I'm guessing once you got into sculpture or textiles, you had your people in some way or another. And so as somebody who teaches an ID, I'm pretty familiar with like the types of things that students want to do when they leave school, the types of places they want to work or what they think they might do next. And I'm just curious, what did you guys think that you would be doing when you left RISD?
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. I feel like you get in sculpture, it was so, I just stayed in the Metcalf building, and then I'd see everybody else out at parties and stuff, and that's where you get to meet everybody else. But I was just spending like all of my time in the foundry, basically. And, the wood shop got moved down there eventually. And then it was just like, I never left the foundry. And so I was just making things with all of my friends, just like constantly getting into things. And I guess I was like casting things for local artists, and I was like fabricating stuff for other projects. So I was already kind of getting into this. I was going to be a fabricator in some regard, and I was going to be an artist, just do that thing. And so I as soon as I got out of RISD, I had a fabrication job, and I sort of thought, oh, this is where my trajectory is. And then I'm glad that I'm not suited to just be in a shop working on restoration projects. And I just got really, really bored really quick. And
All
then
right.
started to switch gears. And then that's kind of when Julie and I met.
Okay. And Julie, what about you?
So I grew up in Maine. I grew up extremely rurally in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in Brooklyn, Maine, which is like a population of 300 people. And when I went away to college, before I went to RISD, I started at Parsons in the city, and had a very like country girl in the city experience. And I was like, this is too much for me. This is too much for me. But it was an experience that I got out of my system, I think. And so when I went to RISD, I had that much nicer, smaller city experience and knew that when I graduated, I wouldn't go for a city experience. And so I had a lot of friends that were preparing to go into design jobs, right into like going into big time things, really amazing jobs. And at that time, I don't think that I knew anybody who was taking the like, I'm just gonna go move into a cabin in the woods and like, and I had a lot of people being like, no, Julie, don't, just like don't. And I was like, no, I think that this is really like, that is where I see myself. And so I always had this path home to Maine. I did end up staying in Providence for quite a bit of time, and worked not at a computer, which was what I had planned on. I like really didn't want to be doing any desk jobs. So I worked for an artist, Dave Cole, for a good few years, who does large scale like textile based sculpture projects. And that was like my first venture into watching a person create something really huge and kind of bigger than himself in the art world. And I learned so much about just like kind of making something out of nothing and how to do it, like pulling up your bootstraps and just like making big things happen with a small team. And I definitely took that with me and carried that into every single thing that I did. But quickly after that, I wanted to just like travel and experience life and do all sorts of like good laid back things. And so I did. And I ended up teaching in Ireland for a little bit. Tom and I taught in Maine for a bit. And
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop you there because I'm going to lead into that because
totally.
you're getting into this next question, which is like in the time that I've known you. So full disclosure for all of the guests who joined us tonight, Anthony, Julie, and I, we all live in Maine, and not that far from each other, and we've known each other for quite a few years now. And in the time since I've met you, I'll remember the first time I went to a house that you were renting, and I walked in and you guys had like all this stuff strewn around on the floor, and you were like doing like a small scale manufacturing of moccasins. And then you were also branding a restaurant, doing the interior, like making these amazing illustrations for their menu and their doors. You were building websites. Julie and I taught a high school design program, and we also co-founded a co-working space, which is still running today. And so just in that period of time, I've seen you guys do so many different things. And so I want to ask, like, what's guided you, and when did you know, and when do you know when you're going to pivot to the next thing? Because I've seen you do so many things, and I'm curious to know, like, what's guided that decision-making process?
I think it was always a search for.
It was always what?
It was always a search for like feeling that feeling of like, what can support our life? Like, what do we want out of this life? What do we want out of our work? And like, let's dip our toe in all of these different things to figure out what it is that makes us happy. Because I think that when you leave college, that discovery process is really complex, and like trying to figure out what actually fulfills you as an artist, but also that is going to make you money, especially living in a rural place where there aren't a lot of opportunities for like a design job in general. That like we were really on this path of self-discovery, work discovery. And then, but looking back retrospectively, it all makes a lot of sense. It was all very random then, but it makes a lot of sense. And all of these pieces kind of like have been put together to make both of our careers what they are now. And yeah, I'm so thankful for all of those like funny jobs.
So many like so many things that it was just, okay, what does this person need? What is like, where can we add benefit? Where can we make money? That's like the early days were just like, okay, what is the need here? Okay, let's learn how to make websites. And it was like, just as websites were getting easy to like make for someone who knew how to use a good computer, but before the like general public knew how to make a website. And so it was like, okay, let's do that. And then it was like, oh, we both like really love 2D design and drawing. And it was like, okay, let's figure out like where this can allow us to be self-employed. So then we can figure out what we want to do. And it was just, it was, you know, it was definitely challenging for a few years, just trying to make it work. And just sitting at the computer, like being like, okay, when is that email going to come in? Because I need to pay some bills. And like, you know, moccasins are not going to cut it. But
I do think we always knew that the struggle was going to pay off. I think that we always had it in our heads, like, this is going to be hard. Everything is hard. Even like jobs that like the money is set in stone, those jobs are hard. And what we were doing was hard. And we knew that if we stuck with it, it was going to pay off.
Yeah. And it wasn't like grind it out like, oh, I'm just a web designer, I'm going to grind this thing out. It was like, no, we're like in where we know that all of these things are close, but not exactly what we want, but it's getting us there. And it was like, okay, well, this is close, so we're going to do this. And then it was like, okay, the next thing would come, and someone would reach out with an email, and we wouldn't even know what it was, you know, and it would be something new and be like, let's do that. And it was just
we
like,
always said yes to things. We
always
always
said yes.
were like, okay, you want us to do that? Yeah, we can do that. And we would figure out how to do it. I mean, that is how we got into web design, because neither one of us was trained graphic designers. So we were just like, yes, we can do that. And now like I am in control of my brand's full web presence, and I do our whole website design, and it like makes sense when you look at it that way. Like, of course I had all this experience, and I really enjoyed that part of our lives. And so being able to focus that in for my own brand feels like exciting.
Yeah, it feels like it's come around now, you know. It's like, oh, we have like perspective on it, be like, oh, these things all led to it. But when we were in it, it was very much like, this is getting us closer to what we want. And we don't know exactly what it is that we even want, but we know this is getting us there.
Yeah, and that totally comes through in the work that you both do now, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I definitely see how all of those things have built towards, you know, your current work and the things that you're seeing through. You know, one thing that does strike me, and Julie, you're the actual Mainer here on the call, because you were born and raised here, and Anthony and I just, you know, joined just, you know, 20 years ago. But you know, folks in Maine tend to do so many different things, because, you know, they'll fish, or they'll be carpenters, or they'll do, you know, farming. There's always just this spirit of, you just make do, and you have to do 5 different jobs. And I think one of the things that's really interesting now is that, you know, in this sort of COVID time, we're seeing that a lot of people are moving out of cities because they can work remotely. And you guys did this a long time ago, right after school. And Julie, for you, it wasn't like you were going to like this remote location. You were kind of coming home in some ways. So what advice would you give to folks who are, you know, moving to small communities that don't have all the big things that cities might have?
Well, I do think that like that you really need to figure out how you want to live, and like what you want to get out of your daily life. And like, I think we're all fulfilled by different things. And like, some of us are fulfilled by like farming and gardening and making things, and some of us are not. And some of us are fulfilled by like seeing a lot of people and like interacting face to face and like having a lot of social time. And I think that you kind of want to choose your place based on that, because I do feel like in Maine, we don't have a lot of social time with people. We have like a really nice small group of friends, but we don't see a lot of people, and we're comfortable with that. But we also needed to find our outlets for that sort of energy, because that, especially coming out of RISD, where I feel like there's a really intimate relationship with students and teachers, and just like people are really close with each other. And then moving into like a rural area where it's like, oh, all of a sudden I don't have all of these people to collaborate with. I don't have all of these like people to talk to and be inspired by. So we had to really kind of search outside of Maine to find a place that felt inspiring, that was different. And that is what brought us to California, and why we have such a kind of like a relationship with Los Angeles, because we have a huge, rich friends group here of like just amazing people, artists, designers, and that kind of like fills our cup on that side. And then we go home and we can kind of like be a little reclusive, which feels also really nurturing for our like creative side.
Yeah, and like we haven't been. This is Julie's first trip to LA since last February, so it's not like we're living bi-coastal or something like that. And for me, the biggest kind of thing about it is really like going inward and really spending the time to figure out like what it is I'm trying to do. Where if I'm here, like, so if the advice for someone who's going to live rurally and they're trying to be an artist, just to live rurally, then it's really about like doing the inner work and getting the time and space to really work out your mind and your like soul. And like, that is like, you live rurally so you can do that. So you have no distractions for that stuff, and then really dive into your subconscious and build your work out of that. And you're going to just end up doing a lot of varied things to make the bills, but like you're doing the inner work.
Time. I think that's the other thing. I think that living in cities, there's so much like you're always going, and like there's not a lot of like time to in between work stuff and social stuff. And then when you're living rurally, you end up having all of this time that you're like, how do I fill this space? And like, I think that's where I find a lot of like my creativity and like the excitement of like what's going to be next, but also these like random jobs. And like where Anthony and I have all of these like fun ideas and time to execute those things. And that is exciting. That's like, to me, that's the most exciting part about living in a rural environment, is just like being able to move through our days slowly and
having more time to do all of that stuff. So it's like we don't have as much social time, but we're raising a family and we're like artists, and we're like I'm like so busy with my like research and my projects that I'm not like, I don't feel like I'm missing something. And then I get the internet and I can like talk to all my friends. It's just like, this is like perfect,
Yeah.
Like if you were doing this into like 2000, like, oh my God, it would probably be like a bummer.
I mean, I think about that a lot because my parents moved to Maine in the late 70s at a time very much like it is now, where people are like, we're leaving the city and wanting to start this like off the grid lifestyle. And to think about them and moving here without any of the things that we have access to, and they moved even more remotely than we live now, and how they made it work as like creative people in the world, and who they've become now as they're like in their next season of life is like, it's amazing that they made it through it.
Yeah, I know. Well, totally. But you're like your dad. You think about your dad. Your dad was like, carpenter, and then he had a job, in town, and it was like it. But for like and then your stepmom being an artist, like a fine artist, so that time was like so good because you could be in her studio. I think like for us, we like are bridging some kind of gap where all of our work really comes back down to communications and marketing to some degree. And so it's like we're bridging like fine art to like, communications to commerce. And so we have like a lot of avenues and daily conversations with people all around the country because, we're in these big projects, we're doing lots of big projects in that way. And I think like that's the thing that makes it so great right now. And I feel so comfortable in my life is that, I'm able to live here and my day to day is so beautiful. And then I also get to have these connections around the country that are like fulfilling me in this way that it feels like I'm in this, I don't feel like disconnected from the city or like what's going on in the world. I feel like, I think it's proof, like we're doing this, like this clearly our what we're doing is getting out in the world. So it's like, I think if you're going to live rurally, you just have to like live it, just really get into it and don't have to like be like worrying about, are you going to see people? It's just like, forget all of that. Just like get to work,
So let's talk a little bit more about the work and the projects then, because, well, first of all, when I met you guys, I always say your names together. Like I would be like, oh, Anthony and Julie and Anthony.
Yeah.
Like you guys were like just always together. You're
still-
always
I mean,
together.
this is rare. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So this feels really odd that you're
Yeah.
in LA,
All right.
you
We
know.
probably talked on the phone like 6 times today. Like,
We did for like a long time.
yeah, like feel ourselves.
Yeah,
We were like hyping each other up.
So from the very start, I always knew you as like Anthony and Julie, Julie and Anthony.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, you've done all kinds of projects that have been joint ventures that we talked a little bit about the ones early in your career. And then you've also done things that have been like very separate initiatives, but still have these, connections because you're always talking and communicating. And I mean, so what have you guys learned about working with one another, and how do you balance work and life when it's just like all one thing?
I mean, it's incredibly hard. And like
Yeah.
we I don't know if we've gotten good at it. But I do think that we've gotten into like a groove a little bit about remembering that we each need space to think and create. We need space with each other to be able to like space with each other without our children to be able to like brainstorm ideas. We both need time with all of us as a family doing things that like fulfill us, like just living our life. And like we spend a lot of time just like playing and like exploring and hiking and like doing all of these things that really like are important for us to be creating good work and to be good bosses and to be good parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where this fundamental thing is, it all comes back to like strong mental health and doing the like work to really like better ourselves and to better like our family. Because as soon as like we're dealing with all of that stuff, like we're just like clearing the pathways for such creativity. And there's like the logistical things, like it's way, we talked about this today. It's just way easier if we both give like 100% instead of like pandering back and forth to each other to like try and take care of the kids and like take care of our our life. And it's like there's like logistical things that you have to figure out, especially because when you have kids, you have like your time is so precious and your time alone, and you have to make the best use of it. And it's like brings a lot of clarity, because you're like, I have no time for bullshit. Like I have none. So I don't like now, like with business ideas, I'm like, that is like so many things. I'm like, cut that out. Like, that's not what I want to do. And it's like going to waste a bunch of time, and I don't have any time to waste. So it's like, there's these things that like, when you really start getting into it and you like, wrestle with them, you see that there's so much positive and beneficial aspects to the problems. There's so many ways to like give you an opportunity to really get into it.
I do feel like as soon as we realized that we need to both lead our own projects, and that like I needed to do something that was different than Anthony needed to do for our own things, that was when we kind of like realized that that's where the support came from. I find that we work better apart while we're supporting each other. So like with my brand, Anthony definitely supports me in that, but isn't necessarily a huge part of it. And same with the house building stuff.
It's like, it's a lot of behind the scenes. It's like, there's a lot of
it took us a long time to figure out that how to work in that way, because we did like, our instinct is that we want to do everything together. But then that is where we were finding a lot of like, it's hard to share. We both have a lot of ideas, and we both have like a lot of passion for creating things, and to try and put all of that into one room is like, it's a lot. So making sure that we both could be fulfilled by two different things that made sense, that informed each other also.
And expand the team, so like I work with people that on, material research and architecture, and I'll just like, I don't like, if I need somebody else because Julie and I have enough to talk about that's like fun and exciting. It's like, there's not enough time to talk about everything. So we've like expanded our teams to talk about more fun and exciting things.
So I have a business partner here on the brand who lives in LA. I probably talk to him as much as I talk to Anthony.
Yeah. It's like we're honestly in communications. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is just we're like, we're doing these things, but the biggest thing that we are actually doing is just communicating. And
Cool.
it's
So I want to talk about those projects that you're referencing, which is, the home project, and I want to spend a little time talking about Rudy Jude. So let's start with the house project. So Apple Plus has done a feature about the house you built here in Maine.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that before it even started, and it seemed like, oh yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Like, it's a house project. You made it into something way more than that. And so just talk a little bit
You're
about.
saying I complicated it. You made it. I did. I made it way more complicated than it needed to be.
So tell us why. Like, what guided that?
Oh man, because of my education, I just couldn't leave things alone. As soon as I had to start making decisions, it was like, well, okay, like now I have to think about every single thing. Like that's the thing. Like woman who drafts me, like like if someone presents me with like an option, or this is what we're dealing with, I'm gonna have an opinion on it. And so like they've learned to not share everything with me, and it goes true. Like I just got so into all of the details, and like house building is really, in any like architecture project, it boils down to a series of decisions. It's just like one decision after another, and constant problem solving, because there needs to be a decision made. And so I just like dove right into it. I mean, it was like 4 straight years to get all of the built. Like I built our house, then I restored my mom's cape, and then I built the library. And
yeah, so the Apple TV show just focuses on our house, but there was, during that time, there was a series of 4 buildings. And if you don't mind if I chime in about the house stuff.
Of course not.
Yeah, I just can't help it. But I think it's easier for me to say like why I think that the building is where it's simple, but it's special, because of like where we were in our lives when Anthony was designing it, and we were just about to have our first son. We were really thinking about this idea of home and the structure of a home, and then the being pregnant and thinking about the environmental impact of like us as people, us on our unborn baby, the products that we were using, the things that we were like putting into this house, like all of that had a lot of emphasis on what we were trying to make and what kind of house we wanted to live in.
Yeah, there was let me just say, there was like no real separation between like the things we were eating and the products we were using to the products that we were using to build the house with. And like, trying to reduce products, and, getting back to like, said this to Tom the other day, but this idea of being an antidote to an industry's productization over ideas. And it was like, okay, how do we take back this knowledge and make informed decisions? And and it just, we did that with every aspect of our life. We were doing it with like because we were concerned about how we're gonna like bring Diogo into the world, and on and on and on. But
I think
really,
sorry, no, go Tom.
I was just gonna say that really resonated with me when we were discussing that earlier. Just this notion of knowledge being replaced by products. And as someone who's also built homes, so many decisions are just literally made at the hardware store based on what's available and what everyone does up here. And you find so many contractors who are just like, well, that's not how we do it. And there are all kinds of constraints as to why we make decisions about things. But I think, you were able to make this into something that was just a reflection of your beliefs, which is something that just comes through.
Yeah, I'm so happy that did, because that's honestly, when Julie talks about it, it's like, that is what it was. We were just like, this was a time in our life where we're reevaluating everything, and realizing that like the environment and the ecology, like everything is like messed up. And we're like we're like building in this environment, we're bringing a kid into this, like all of these things need to be thought about
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's all the same education. It's all just being like so curious and just being like emphatic that you're going to have an informed decision.
Yeah. And I do think that like when we were building the house, we were thinking like RISD students, we were thinking like how we would have brought any project into fruition, which is different than how an architect goes about building a house.
Yeah.
And so we were like thinking about it like aesthetically, we're thinking about it environmentally, we were thinking about like how we were going to just exist, like what we needed in the space. And we were building it for ourselves. And I think that like so many architects are not building things for themselves. They're like, so there's a missing piece of that. So the home is very tailored to us and tailored to our needs. And then it makes it, when you walk inside, it's like, oh, this is weird. And like, this is special. It doesn't feel like anybody else's house because it's like all of those moments were so considered.
Yeah, and we weren't drawing really. I mean, you just see like the show like has a couple of examples of drawings that Julie and I did, and it was like really we weren't drawing the house. We had no blueprints. I had like one or two carpenters working for me, and who were just they were helping me because I didn't know how to build a house. I knew like fundamentally, I have a sculpture degree, but fundamentally how it's going to go together. So they were showing me like standard framing details, and I'd be like, oh, why are you doing it like that? Like, and so it was like a place for me to be like, okay, I can rely on like these guys to make sure that I'm like not way out of bounds. And then I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And, when you're making decisions daily, instead of drawing them and you're making them in real time, it becomes much more like a sculpture. It slows the process way down, but it in the end is like way more satisfying.
There's a lot of constant discovery in that process. And I think that there's like
things you would never know.
Yeah, things you would never know. And also when you're like learning about conventional things like home building from people who are building conventional houses, both Anthony and I are the kind of people who are like, oh, that's interesting that that's how that works. But why wouldn't you do it this way? Like, we're going to do it this way and figure out how to do it this way. And everybody's like, why? No, don't. That's not how it's done.
Yeah, probably myself included.
But we were always very much like, no. We're going to figure it out. And we're going to make it happen. And I think that there's so many amazing details on the house, especially like the soot paint. We call the house the soot house. Mm-hmm. And the soot paint was like this discovery. It was just like such a fun discovery to figure out how to make that. And it's my favorite part of the house. And it just like gets better with age and time. And like, it feels exciting to create something like paint and to be able to create something out of purely natural materials that gives us and our house this look that is like and unlike anything else.
Yeah, now I mean that's what we're just continuing. We're like, now we're putting the same stuff, the same curiosity towards insulation, and now we're looking at making insulation out of straw and like mussel shells, and looking at ionic bonds of material, and just like getting deeper into. Now I have more time. We're building another house to like put all of these ideas into, and so we have more time. We have some more money, so now it's like we can focus even more on all of these amazing things and get to like, oh, we need hardware. Like the hardware in our house, we just ran out of time to really dive into it. Now we can dive into that, and it's like we can just continue to get bogged down in details.
Well, I love this idea of it being like the ultimate RISD project, because I mean the best projects for students are the ones where you don't know what it's going to be like at the end. It's not predetermined because you just continue to take these risks and try things and experiments. And I think that's the nature of like true creativity, is like that risk taking. Because I think for someone with a very logical mind, it's like, well, why would you ever do that? But when it's yours, it's an expression of you. And so that's why you do it. It's an expression of how you want to live and what you believe in. So that helps me understand decisions that you made as well, and so I think I think it's really fascinating to look at it from that perspective. I want to talk about Rudy Jude and hear a little bit more about Rudy Jude, which is Julie is is Rudy Jude. And it's, for those of you who don't know, it's a clothing line for kids and adults that, I'm probably overly simplifying this, but it's for kids and adults that uses natural dyes and sustainable practices, and everything's designed and made in America.
Yeah.
And, so when we were starting at the Steelhouse, Julie, which is a co-working space that Julie and I helped co-found, I remember sewing machines everywhere, and you just had piles of fabric and just like, half drunk coffee cups, and just, it was a hot mess. There was stuff.
That has not changed, Tom.
I know. And I'm just wondering, like, I feel like I just blinked my eyes and you went from, here you and I are like working on a high school play with kids to now you have like this huge following on social media. You've got a store in LA, and your brand is just like completely grown.
Yeah.
Popping off, Tom.
Yeah. And so like,
It's crazy. I mean, it
like,
really
did you have a plan? How did
I mean,
this
I
happen?
did. I went into this brand with the plan, knowing that I wanted this to be bigger than me. I wanted it to be bigger than what I could create on my own. I went into it knowing that I was going to have to put together a team, and that I wanted to invest money into this and to like make it into a big thing. And it was really scary for a really long time. But the reason why I did it, I mean, when I was at RISD, I was in textiles. I always had was interested in natural materials. I was like very anti-plastic, very anti, like, just didn't want to work with any of these things. I did a lot of like experimental sewing projects. I loved learning about like how fabrics were made and like how things were dyed and the impact of them on the environment. That was always in my head. Before college, I was always making things. I think my like college portfolio was an apparel portfolio that I had done. I had like been making clothes my whole life. So I always knew that there was going to come a time that I was going to want to do something like that. I think I doubted myself for a long time that like that wasn't a possibility, especially for somebody who had never gone into the industry, never had an internship, never worked in fashion, didn't know anybody in fashion. So it was something that felt like unreachable for a really long time. And then when we were in Maine and we were doing manufacturing moccasins for a friend of mine who had started this moccasin company, and she grew this thing that she was hand making all of these things and like was coming out in seasons and doing these things. And I was watching her do it and helping her. And I was like, oh, this is it. Like, you just make the thing and then you sell it. And I was like, what's an aha moment for me? And like, obviously it's not that simple. So around the time that we finished the house was when I started Rudy Jude. And it was right when we had our son. The line did start as just a kids and baby line. I had known that eventually I would want to do a grown-up line. I thought it wasn't going to be the same brand, that I would like do a branch off. And I started off the brand knowing that, like, being very aware of, as a person who makes things, my impact on the environment, and that if I was going to be producing something that was going out into the world, producing something new, that I needed to be very conscious of what I was making and how I was making it. And so I really spent some time like thinking about my ideal supply chain and like what that would look like on a bigger scale. And I obviously was just like one mom in Maine who was like, how do I do this? Like, how do I plant dye things at a large scale? Like, this isn't possible here. And so I came to Anthony at one point, and I think Diogo was like 8 months old. And I was like, I think the only place that we can plant dye clothes is in California. So we need to go to California. And so I think within a few months, we packed up the car, we got somebody to house sit our house, and we drove out to California. And I, in a very probably uncharacteristic of me then, cold walked into factories around LA with a baby in a baby carrier with my samples. And I was like, I want to make these. Like, how do we make these? And it was it was real. I went into some factories that I was like, whoa, this is like, I can't be a part of this. I saw dye houses that I was just like terrified by. And then everything kind of fell into place with luck. And I very much by chance ran into a woman on the street who it's like the most random story.
What?
I ran into a woman on the street. We struck up a conversation and she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I am here to make my clothing line. And I want to plant dye these clothes." Because at that point, I didn't know of anybody who was doing that on a large scale. And she looked at me and she said, "My fiance owns the only natural dye house on the West Coast." And she said, "We could go out to dinner." And so we did. And we went out to dinner that night. And I met Max, who is now my partner at Rudy Jude. And he and I have worked together since day one. And he is a genius. And we own, now that we're partners, we own our dye house. We have a small factory. We do a lot of the cut and sew there. We're just starting a program where we're milling fabric here in LA, because before we were buying organic fabric from Japan, but now we are milling it close to home to cut on shipping. And it feels really exciting to be able to have my like textile heart and soul, knowing like that we are getting to knit our fabrics here.
That is incredible.
So now, yeah, we opened the store last year and we have a big following, and we're kind of, I mean, we have our most popular thing is our jeans. And so we are kind of a jeans company.
I want some, by the way.
Yeah, we'll get you here. You might have to fight people for them. But we'll get
Come
them.
on, I don't have the inside track with you, Julie. Come
I
on.
barely do, Tom, you know?
No, I'll get you up there. But yeah, it's pretty wild. It kind of like, now it's bigger than me. It's taken on its own thing. We have, our factory is like a team of 3 to 6 people. We have 2 people who lead production. We have a retail director. I'm the only person still on the design team, but yeah, we're growing, and it feels exciting and scary and surreal and all of the things. But yeah, it's exciting.
So I want to ask another question that's related to both Rudy Jude as well as the house project, and that's the role that social media has played on your business models. And the internet is like a scary, toxic, crazy place.
Yep.
Yet you've managed to use platforms that have really helped to grow your businesses. And I'm just curious, like, what advice do you have for folks who are interested in promoting their businesses and their brands, and like what have you learned in these experiences?
I'll say my first little part, my disclaimer, and then Julie will, take it over. The biggest thing is, like, sometimes when you talk to somebody and you tell them like, you got, about marketing, and they start to like cringe at this idea. And I'm always like struck by that, because like, it's such a trigger word for people. Like, you feel like someone is like from a corporation selling you some bullshit, and it's like, the communication and marketing are your business. They're just a reflection of what you're doing. If you're communicating properly, all you're doing is saying like, hey, my website is saying, hey, you're saying, hey, all of your materials are saying, hey, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. And so like this idea that you're not gonna do that, or like you're doing that in a way that feels weird to you, it's like, well.
But I do think that like that this is so new, the way that like people are marketing their businesses now, that it's so new. And like traditional marketing is hard and unfun and takes a big step away from like the root of what the businesses are. And that, I think, is what we were all taught that marketing was, is that there's a business, then there's a marketing firm, this is how they promote, they spend a lot of money to do these things. And now it's so different. And like being able to be in control of what you're putting into the world, and how it's viewed and how authentic it is. And I think that like that, to me, the most important part of having like a positive relationship with social media, to having a positive outcome from social media, is all about like figuring out the things that you want and making sure that like you are working authentically towards those things, and like showing that you are a person who is making things and a person who is like trying to grow a business, and not everything is polished and perfect. And I think that that's not like, that is the old marketing, and the new marketing is like, people want real and they don't want polished and perfect. And so finding comfort in being able to share as much as you feel comfortable with about like the behind the scenes of things and how things work and like how things are made. I think all of that is so important. And I do think that it takes a little bit of like shaking up what the things that we've been taught.
Yeah,
which
because
are
you're not putting up like a
like-
wall you're not putting,
sorry. No, I'm the whole fake it till you make it sort of
yeah,
mantra is like not the case anymore. Like people don't
Right.
want to see people faking
Right.
it. They want to see
Yeah.
people like trying hard and working hard and like
Yeah.
being
Yeah,
themselves.
you're not having to put on a mask to like,
Yeah,
and actually like you want to see the truest reflection of the business in the materials. And it's like, if you're making materials, it's then a reflection of how you are, or how you want to be,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
it's like such a I think looking at it that way, it becomes like really healthy, because it's like, this is who I want to be in the world, or this is a part of me, and this is the best version of me, and I am working towards that, or I am there. And it feels really affirmational, as opposed to feeling kind of like
I find
behind the scenes and closed.
because social media is also so personal and so like in our faces all the time, that like finding your own relationship with it, like the way that my presence exists online, I don't feel I I don't feel stressed out by having the presence that I have, and I know a lot of people do. And I feel zero pressure to like share every day. I feel zero pressure to look at the numbers. I feel zero pressure to like time when I'm going to post something, to plan any posts. I think that it's like the trick is having the social media reflect what your actual life is, and not trying to like put yourself into social media. Like it should be the other way around. And people ask me all the time, just like, how do you cope with like doing, like it seems so stressful to do it. And it really like, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy social media and Instagram, and like it gets tricky at times. But I see how it benefits me and us, and I love the community I've built online. I've made so many amazing friends, and yeah, there's a lot of benefit to it. And I think that you just have to kind of like crack your own code. There's no like in an Instagram code. It's like cracking your like
Right.
personal social media code.
Well, I have to say that you're quite masterful at it. But what I want people to know who are, in our audience or who might follow you is that, like you said, you're totally authentic. And I feel like the Julie and the Anthony that I see, it would be easy for people to think like, oh, that looks too beautiful. How could it be that they live in this beautiful place? But I also want everyone to know how hard you work, because I think that's a really important thing. I would just like everyone to know, like, you guys work hard at this, and it's not easy. And I've seen you go through the struggles and the ups and downs. And so,
I really appreciate that, Tom. Yeah, I mean, we are like true optimists, and Julie is like the most optimistic person I've ever met, and she's really brought me into that, mentality, and feeling like safe and secure in being like, we're gonna do this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you really, it is, that's what sees you through all of the hard work that you need to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have so many more questions, but I want to make sure that we save a little time if any of our panelists
Oh yeah,
have questions.
we could probably if we need to run over, we're probably okay to do that.
So let's get to a couple of the questions. Okay, so one of them is kind of a big question, which is like, do you have any tips for someone who's thinking about building a home? Okay, so there's that question. And then another question is, with all your ideas, how do you decide on which projects to pursue next? And so I'll let you guys kind of choose if you'd like to respond to one of those. Or
Julie, why don't you do I'll do the house one and you do the other one.
Yeah, do you want to start?
No, you start, because it's
I
he
think,
has to think about it.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
We talk a lot. We talk a lot about our ideas, and sometimes we have bad ones, and sometimes we have great ones. And I do think that like as as we've gotten older and as we've kind of like dug deeper into our careers, our ideas are kind of themed more directly towards what we're doing. And so it's easier to be like, that doesn't make sense. That's like either off brand, or that isn't something that we can do, or nobody's going to buy that, or we hate that thing. So it's a lot easier to like cut through and get right to the point, because we have a very clear idea of like, these are the things that we make, these are the things that we don't make. But
Well, and I was just going to add, within that, it's like we have an identity that's we've built, and so there's like an outward face that everyone sees, and then there's projects that are aligned with that and things that don't. But then there's like all this stuff like that I like, things I'm researching and looking at that have no marketplace at this point, but they're still like just ongoing in my
both
mind.
of us are constantly making things.
Yeah.
Both of us are constantly reading things. I spend my days at my office, and I like try really hard not to do a ton of office work anymore, but I spend most of my day just like making weird stuff. And maybe it's like just like toys for the kids, maybe it's clothes for me, it's clothes for Anthony. It's just like I experiment with so many things, and like there's a day doesn't go by where I don't make something or work on some sort of project. And Anthony's the same. Like like he's working on a sauna right now, and like there's so many ideas that are generating from just like constant creation.
Yeah, and
like,
then we're basically bouncing those like marketability of those ideas is then conversations. There's just being like, I think that this would be great in the world, and it's just like, but it all goes back to like, is that on brand? You know, it's like, oh, we have something to bounce it off of.
And those are just the things that we like follow through with. But like, I think the process of making the things that we don't follow through on is also so important. And like making sure that like the things that we are doing we're doing them because they bring us a lot of joy, and not because we're trying to like fit them into like some sort of bigger project outcome. And like that daily life is bringing so much like fulfillment and joy that like the ideas kind of make themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, and just my own observation of the work that you guys have done, it's like, I think the difference between somebody who's an artist or a designer or somebody who went to RISD is that other folks talk about ideas, and people who just have it in them, they make ideas. And that's what you guys do. You make ideas, and they don't all become something, but they're parts of how you think through.
Yeah.
Just like,
Totally.
And sometimes they come out years later, you know, finally
right.
like a missing piece. I've read some little thing and I'm like, oh my God, that all makes sense now. You know? And it's like,
that is the other thing, is like knowing that all of this is valuable, and everything that you're doing is valuable, whether or not you have some sort of finished thing to show.
Yeah.
Like, all of these parts are valuable. And like, yeah, they make sense. Like I came to LA with like my watercolor book, like just because why not?
Yeah.
And then somehow along the line, I'll be like, oh, I have all those watercolors that are going to be like great for this thing. I mean, we're doing this artist studio display at the store, and I realized that I kept all of my figure drawings from RISD. And I was like, oh,
nice.
I'm in the store. Like stuff like that, like doesn't necessarily make sense to do it, but then it all kind of like comes back together.
So let's switch to the house question, but I'm gonna switch it a little bit, because the second question came in that's sort of related. So, did you mess up in any of the steps during the house build?
oh my God, yeah.
And how did you fix it? And you're probably thinking like every day, like
so many. I mean, which one do you want to talk about? The like personal ones, the bigger picture ones, the small? Like, there's honestly, yes, it is not easy. Oh my God, architecture takes forever to get any kind of reward. You know, like honestly, like the biggest like thing is just staying committed to getting the hours in so that you can see it through. That is like the long game, where like a sculpture, like, of course some sculptures take a really long time, but you know, when you amp up the scale, like it just takes so long. So satisfaction is like sometimes so far in the future that you need to have this like discipline of being like, well, the next couple weeks are gonna kind of suck, but like I'm gonna get through it. And so, yeah. And then I messed up like I remember the heat shield when I parged coated it with concrete, it delaminated the first like 2 times. And I was like, it looks perfect. Oh my God, look at this. Look at all the gesture. The next day I see this like hairline crack in it. And I'm like, and I go and like touch it. And I'm like, it's moved. I'm like, no, it'll be okay. You know? And I'm like, oh my God, the whole thing's delaminated. And I took like a knife and I could just scrape the thing off. Like it was, you know, it was like constantly things like that. And then you just do it again. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like,
Hopefully slightly differently, but
yeah, just like, yeah, you do it exactly. Sometimes you have no idea why it failed, and other times you know exactly, and you just are like, you know, you're constantly battling physics, you know, and you're trying to like read up at night like about physics to make better decisions about like taping and flashing. And the thing about it is I was so into insulation. I was so into foundations. I was so into like the, you know, the envelope of the building that I was just reading about all of these things. And so I would go to like, you know, journal like construction, green building. I just start with typing. I would research for hours every day, basically. And then I would gain some kind of knowledge. And then I was like, okay, we're going to do this wall system and going to use these fancy fabrics, and we're going to, you know, use old windows here. And it's really like, if you're going to do it like I did it, you know, I don't think that you should, but if you're going to do it like you're going to like be an artist about building your house, then you need to just be ready to ramp up your education like tenfold, and hire a couple carpenters that you can get for like, you know, they're like, you know, independent contractors, and just get yourself like what you can afford for some help. And then just, you know, if they're not willing to see the weird ideas through, you just, you know, find someone else. Honestly, you know, some of it you really just have to like be the person, be like, I want to see this through.
Yeah.
If you're standing in my way, I need you to. So anyway, and, you know, get really curious, do the research, and have fortitude, because it's going to be a long process.
Well, this has been super fun to catch up with you guys. And I know that so many people have been interested to hear more about your work and your motivations and just like what inspires you. So thanks for spending time with us tonight. And, you know, usually I run into you guys like at the hardware store or something, and hopefully I'll see you both soon. For those of you who haven't met Anthony and Julie in person, they're an amazing couple. And unfortunately, we have this pandemic because Julie is a great hugger, and she always gives these really great hugs once she gets to know you. So want to wish you guys the best of luck with your next projects, whatever those might be, and with Rudy Jude and all of your building projects. So thanks again for all of you out there who joined us. And Anthony and Julie, I hope to see you soon.
Totally.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.